Have you ever done something wrong and then, as a form of punishment, received a spanking or were hit with a belt? If this is you, then you aren't alone. The World Health Organization states that around 60% of children aged 2 to 14 years regularly suffer physical punishment by their parents or other caregivers. As someone who grew up with corporal punishment, I believe I'm qualified to speak on the topic. And even though I can acknowledge that there are times it might have been necessary as a form of correction, I can also see that other methods of discipline may have been more appropriate in certain situations. While we can agree that corrective measures are necessary when someone misbehaves, I am of the opinion that corporal punishment is a relic of the past, is not the only way to correct a wayward child, and may actually cause more harm than good. I will mostly be talking about the definition and origins of corporal punishment, the consequences of corporal punishment, and alternate methods of discipline. Now, to explain these points in greater detail. First, the definition and origins of corporal punishment. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, corporal punishment can be defined as punishment that involves hitting someone. With this in mind, we can all see that corporal punishment employs a unique method of administration, as other punishments given to people for wrongdoing do not utilize the same methodology. Additionally, corporal punishment has evolved over the years because people have been implementing it in various ways depending on the situation. The Mail and Guardian mentions that forms of corporal punishment include hitting with a hand or an object, pinching, burning, throwing objects at a learner, forcing children to stay in uncomfortable positions, kicking, grabbing, scratching, pulling hair, or denying a child meals, the use of a toilet, and shelter from heat or cold. Now, the exact origins of corporal punishment are hard to pin down. However, the Sydney Gazette states that in 1816, two men named Joseph Salter and William Nash were publicly whipped for stealing pigs. Spartacus Educational also mentions the main method used to control the behavior of slaves was the threat of having them whipped, the number of lashes depending on the seriousness of the offense. Austin Stewart wrote that on his plantation, 39 was the number for most offenses. Francis Frederick ran away and was free for 9 weeks. After he was captured, he was given 107 lashes. Moses Roper received 200 lashes, and this was only brought to an end when the master's wife pleaded for his life to be spared. I think it's safe to say that corporal punishment has been around as long as human beings have been roaming the earth. This means many adopted the practice until it became widespread to the point where it is now ingrained in many cultures and society as a whole. Next, we will examine the consequences of corporal punishment. An article from Child Abuse and Neglect says, findings supported an intergenerational cycle of violence. Parents who experienced frequent corporal punishment during childhood perceived its use as acceptable and frequently spanked their children. These children, in turn, advocated that spanking be used as a disciplinary method and preferred aggressive conflict resolution strategies with peers and siblings. This is one of the saddest things about corporal punishment, in my opinion, because it teaches people to use violence to get their way. Sadly, because many do not know or may be unwilling to learn alternative methods of discipline, they and those who follow them will contribute to this repetitive cycle. Steve Miller of Save the Children also adds, many of us who experience physical punishment as children also tend to view it as an appropriate response to parent-child conflict today, much in the same way that we used to justify punishments at school like 6 of the best. In doing so, we normalize and legitimize things that have no place in our society. Another negative consequence comes from a study that states harsh corporal punishment can be dangerous to brain development, as excessive corporal punishment has been found to be associated with the emergence of depression, addiction, and aggressive behaviors. Excessive in this case involved more than open hand slaps to the buttocks, and in all cases persisted past the child's 6th birthday. How detrimental or beneficial spanking is depends a great deal on the age of the subject, frequency of administration, race, who administers the spanking, family context, and whether it is used as a primary means of discipline or as a backup strategy. Steve Miller mentions that in the Constitutional Court on 18 September 2019, the ruling was upheld, making this the 57th country to achieve a full ban corporal punishment in all settings. The following day, South Africans woke to the news that they could no longer use physical discipline in the home, and the predictable outcry ensued. This is interesting because even though many support corporal punishment and view it as a good thing, one has to wonder how things got so bad that the courts had to be involved, and the result has been a ban in not just one country, but several others. Perhaps this could be a sign of the times, as many practices that were okay in the past are now looked down upon in the modern day. Lastly, we will deal with alternate methods of discipline. Firstly, the Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines discipline as to punish or penalize for the sake of enforcing obedience and perfecting moral character. Now, Amy Morin of Very Well Family offers several methods that are alternatives to corporal punishment. First, timeout. Hitting kids for behavior, especially aggression, sends a mixed message. Your child will wonder why it's okay for you to hit them, but not okay for them to hit their sibling. Placing a child in timeout can be a much better alternative. When done correctly, timeout teaches kids how to calm themselves down, which is a useful life skill. Second, losing privileges. The goal is not to punish your child into submission, but to help them learn to make better choices for the future. If they make a poor choice, teach them the consequence is a loss of a privilege. The loss should be related to the behavior. Make it clear when the privileges can be earned back. For example, you might say, you've lost TV for the rest of the day, but you can earn it back tomorrow by picking up your toys the first time I ask. Third, ignoring mild misbehavior. Selective ignoring can actually be more effective than spanking. This doesn't mean you should look the other way if your child is doing something dangerous or inappropriate, but you can ignore attention-seeking behavior. For example, when your child tries to get attention by whining or complaining, don't give it to them. Look the other way, pretend you can't hear them, and don't respond. Then, when they ask nicely or behave, return your attention to them. Then, rewards for good behavior. Instead of spanking a child for misbehavior, reward them for good behavior. For example, if your child fights with their siblings often, set up a reward system to motivate them to get along better. Providing an incentive to behave can turn around misbehavior fast. Rewards help kids to focus on what they need to do to earn privileges, rather than emphasize the bad behavior they're supposed to avoid. Lastly, teaching new skills. One of the main problems with spanking is that it doesn't teach your child how to behave better. Spanking your child because they threw a temper tantrum won't teach them how to calm down the next time they're upset. Kids benefit from learning how to problem solve, manage their emotions, and compromise. When parents teach these skills, it can greatly reduce behavior problems. Use discipline that is aimed at teaching, not punishing. Another piece of advice comes from Andrew Tan, and he says that once your rules and expectations are clearly conveyed, you can pose the question back to your child when he or she misbehaves. In closing, I'd like to recap that corporal punishment involves hitting someone as a corrective measure and has become entrenched within society and has gone from being used on slaves to the classroom and then the home. Even though many still use it, others have decided to seek out different methods of correction. Lastly, in my view, discipline is not just about punishment, but about helping someone realize a mistake and then aiding them in the process to make better choices. I implore you to seek out different methods to correct your child, and if you still insist on using corporal punishment, I urge you to use it with extreme caution.